The second meeting of the 58th session of the Commission of the Social Development is called to order. I warmly welcome you all this morning. I invite the Commission to turn its attention to item 1 of its provisional agenda, election of officers, and proceed with the election of the chair of the Commission. The Commission may wish to recall that in accordance with the principle of equitable geographical rotation among the 5 regional groups, it is the turn of the African states to hold the chairmanship of the 58th session. Members of the Commission will further recall that during the first meeting of the 58th session of the Commission for Social Development on 21st February 2019, the election of the chair of the Commission for the 58th session was postponed. In a note, verbal, dated 22nd January 2020, from its chair of the month, the group of African states endorsed the candidature of His Excellency Bollier Désiré Wolfranipo, Deputy Permanent Representative of Côte d'Ivoire to the United Nations, as chair of the 58th session of the Commission. In the absence of any other nominations, may I take it that the Commission wishes to elect by acclamation His Excellency Bollier Désiré Wolfranipo as chair of the 58th session of the Commission for Social Development? I hear no objection. It is so decided. It is now my pleasure to declare His Excellency Bollier Désiré Wolfranipo, Deputy Permanent Representative of Côte d'Ivoire to the United Nations, as chair of the 58th session of the Commission for Social Development, and I invite him to take his seat on the podium.
Mesdames les représentantes,
representatives, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to be elected as chair of the 58th session of the Commission for Social Development. And it is with pleasure that I welcome all of you to the start of the work of this session. This commission is one of the oldest functional commissions of the Economic and Social Council. It was created 75 years ago. It is the main intergovernmental space for an intensified global dialogue on social development issues. This commission plays a critical role in supporting member states in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, in particular its social dimension. In particular, the Commission has been advocating for a people-centred and inclusive development that works for all people everywhere, with the objectives of poverty eradication, productive employment, and decent work and social integration. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this year also marks the 25th anniversary of the World Summit for Social Development, held in March 1995 in Copenhagen. 25 years later, and with the adoption of the 2030 Agenda, the vision and principles of the summit remain highly relevant and critical to the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals. Indeed, the promise of the 2030 Agenda, that no one should be left behind because of their gender, race, ethnicity, age, where they live, or socio and economic status, echoes and reinforces the inclusive development vision of the Copenhagen Summit. This session of our Commission also coincides with the action of a decade of action to deliver SDGs for all people. To continue its focus on people as the centre of development, the Commission spotlights affordable housing and social protection systems for all to address homelessness as its priority theme. We will seek strategies to accelerate progress in SDGs 1, 8, 10 and 11, in particular Target 1.3 to implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, and Target 11.1 to ensure access for all to adequate, safe and affordable housing and basic services. We will support Member States in realising these SDGs and the right to adequate housing of the new urban agenda. The resolution we look forward to adopting will be the first resolution addressing homelessness. Action-oriented policy recommendations, together with Chair's summaries of panel discussions, will be our Commission's contributions to the 2020 High-Level Political Forum and the high-level segment of the Economic and Social Council. In addition to the high-level panel discussion on the priority theme this afternoon, 3 panel discussions will be held. They are the Ministerial Forum on 25 years of the World Summit for Social Development, addressing emerging societal challenges to the implementation for the 2030 Agenda. On the 11th of February in the morning, the Multi-Stakeholder Solutions Forum on the priority theme. On the 12th of February in the morning, and the interactive dialogue with senior UN officials on the priority theme on the 12th of February in the afternoon. The Commission will also deliberate on issues pertaining to the social dimensions of the new Partnership for Africa's Development and the modalities for the 4th review and appraisal of the implementation of the Madrid International Plan of Action on Ageing 2002. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the work in front of us is important and challenging, and I look forward to the active participation of all delegations, civil society organisations and the United Nations system. In my capacity as Chair, I am fully committed to working with you for a successful 58th session of the Commission as our collective contribution to the decade of action. Thank you, and I look forward to a very productive Commission. I'm counting on your support in managing our work. I now invite the Commission to again turn its attention to item 1 of its provisional agenda, election of officers, in order to elect the other members of the Bureau. Members will recall that, at its first meeting on the 21st of February 2019, the Commission had postponed to a later date the election of the Vice-Chairs of the Bureau from the Asia-Pacific states, the Eastern European states, the Latin American and Caribbean states, and the Western European and other states. I am pleased to inform the Commission that the states of the Asia-Pacific group have endorsed the candidature of Ms. Sharifa Youssef Al-Nesf, Second Secretary of the Permanent Mission of Qatar. The states of the Eastern European group have endorsed the candidature of Mr. Nikola Nenov, Attaché at the Permanent Mission of Bulgaria, and the states of the Western European and other groups have endorsed the candidature of Ms. Caroline Bartel, Second Secretary of the Permanent Mission of Austria, as Vice-Chairs of the 58th session. In the absence of any other candidates, may I take it that the Commission wishes to elect, by acclamation, Ms. Sharifa Youssef Al-Nesf of Qatar, Ms. Caroline Bartel of Austria, and Mr. Nikola Nenov of Bulgaria as Vice Chairs of the 58th session of the Commission for Social Development? I hear no objection. It is so decided. On behalf of the Commission, I would like to congratulate Ms. Sharifa Youssef Al-Nes of Qatar, Ms. Caroline Bartel of Austria, and Mr. Nikola Nenov of Bulgaria on their election. I would now like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow Bureau members for their hard work and support. To date, the Secretariat has not received a nomination for the Vice Chair from the Latin American and Caribbean states for the 58th session of the Commission. Accordingly, the Commission will further postpone the election of the Vice Chair from the Latin American and Caribbean states. I also wish to inform the Commission that, following consultations with the Bureau, it has agreed that our distinguished Vice Chair, Ms. Sharifa Youssef Al-Nes of Qatar, will also assume the responsibilities of Rapporteur for this session of the Commission. I congratulate Ms. Al-Nes on this appointment. I now invite the Commission to turn its attention to Agenda Item 2, entitled Adoption of the Agenda and Other Organisational Matters. The provisional agenda for this session is contained in document E/CN5/2020/1, and the proposed organisation of work is before you in Annex 1 to the same document. I invite the Commission to first consider the provisional agenda for this session as contained in document E/CN5/2020/1. The provisional agenda and the documentation for the 58th session were approved by the Economic and Social Council in its decision 2019/214. May I take it that the Commission wishes to adopt the provisional agenda? I hear no objection. It is so decided. I now invite the Commission to turn to the proposed organisation of work as contained in Annex 1 to document E/CN5/2020/1. First, let me make a few general comments about the conduct of our work. I would like to seek your cooperation in starting all meetings on time, that is, at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. sharp, in order to make optimum use of the conference resources allocated to the Commission. I would also like to make the following proposal concerning the time limit for statements during the general discussion. Statements on behalf of groups shall not exceed 12 minutes. Statements by individual delegations shall not exceed 7 minutes. Statements by intergovernmental organisations and entities of the United Nations system shall not exceed 5 minutes. And statements by non-governmental organisations shall not exceed 3 minutes. May I take it that the Commission wishes to approve my proposal and the draft organisation of work contained in Annex 1, on the understanding that further adjustments will be made, if necessary, during the session? I hear no objection. It is so decided. I appeal to all speakers to adhere strictly to the time limits just agreed for statements during the general discussion, and I thank you in advance for your cooperation. I also take this opportunity to remind delegations that the deadline for the submission of all draft proposals to the Secretariat is this coming Wednesday, 12th of February at 3 p.m. I now invite the Commission to begin its consideration of Agenda Item 3, entitled Follow-up to the World Summit for Social Development and the 24th Special Session of the General Assembly, and its sub-item A, entitled Priority Theme Affordable Housing and Social Protection Systems for All to Address Homelessness, and sub-item B, entitled Review of Relevant United Nations Plans and Programmes of Action Pertaining to the Situation of Social Groups. The documentation under Agenda Item 3 is in today's Journal of the United Nations. It is my pleasure to welcome the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Zhenmin. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the United Nations Secretariat, I have the honor to join the Chair in welcoming all delegations to this 58th session of the Commission for Social Development. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. It also marks 75 years of this distinguished Commission and the 25 years since the World Summit for Social Development took place in Copenhagen. It was then that a crucial step was taken towards confronting social injustice and inequality. The World Summit for Social Development pledged to eradicate poverty, promote full employment, and foster social integration to achieve stable, safe, and just societies for all. Yet, 25 years on, conflict, poverty, and diseases continue to shorten the lives of many. Global megatrends such as high and rising inequality, slowing economic growth, climate change, the rapid pace of technology development, and its impact on the future of work are squeezing the prospects of social and sustainable development. People's livelihoods are increasingly at risk. In short, we are not on track to meet the Sustainable Development Goals over the past 4 years and now. That is why the Secretary General has launched the Decade of Action to deliver the SDGs by 2030. As we embark on the decade, this Commission has a unique mandate to ensure that those left behind see meaningful improvements in their daily lives. This is especially needed for people living in poverty and in vulnerable situations that include the growing homeless population in our midst. They want affordable housing, quality education, basic health services, and adequate social protection, just to name a few of the most pressing needs. Excellencies, the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs just launched 3 weeks ago the World Social Report 2020. The report provides fresh evidence of our growing unequal world, noting that 7 in 10 people today live in countries where inequalities increased compared to that of 1990. At the same time, the report on World Economic Situation and Prospects 2020, launched by the United Nations in January, shows that the global GDP growth in 2019 hit a 10-year low. Such developments are having a major impact on the ability of countries to implement the Copenhagen Declaration and the Program of Action and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As we continue to tackle the critical issues of social development, we must focus on the vulnerabilities of those left behind. We must find solutions to their daily struggles. In this context, this Commission's spotlight on the theme of affordable housing and social protection systems for all to address homelessness is timely and important. Sustainable Development Goal 11, Target 1, commits to ensuring access for all to adequate, safe, and affordable housing, basic services, and upgrading slums. Indeed, adequate housing is the basis of stability and security for families and households. It also impacts the achievement of other SDGs, including on poverty, and employment, inequality, and the environment. Homelessness is a harmful form of systemic discrimination and social exclusion. It is a global phenomenon that affects people everywhere, in developed and developing countries, in rural and urban areas. The causes of homelessness are many and are interrelated. They include unraveling of working-class communities due to poverty and health shocks. They include declining manufacturing employment, especially the loss of jobs for low and middle-skilled workers due to globalization, automation and stagnant wages, or personal issues such as subsistence abuse. Unchecked gentrification has also pushed property taxes and rents high. This is forcing low-income owners and tenants to move to places often far away from their workplaces. In many countries, the supply of adequate affordable housing is also failing to keep up with the demand. According to UN Habitat, 1.6 billion people live in inadequate housing conditions, with about 15 million forcefully evicted every year. Further, housing has been largely unaffordable for most of the world's population over the last 20 years. United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees also estimates that more than 70 million people have been forced from their homes, including 25 million refugees. Many of these refugees live in inadequate shelters. And moreover, according to the Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing, homelessness is also a global human rights crisis linked to growing inequalities in income, access to land and property. Distinguished delegates, for the most vulnerable, homelessness is not merely a lack of physical housing, but also a loss of family, community, and a sense of belonging. The erosion of self-esteem and despair that is experienced often leads to the breakup of families, substance abuse, poor health outcomes, and the loss of life. It affects people of all ages, genders, and socioeconomic backgrounds. For example, the elder homeless population is growing rapidly and will continue to grow over the next decade. Elder women, in particular, are at risk. They are more vulnerable to poverty and face multiple forms of discrimination, including unequal and unfavorable property and land inheritance rights. Young people are also vulnerable to homelessness, especially given their lack of financial stability and resources. Young migrants are often denied access to housing, as they do not have appropriate identification or are still looking for employment. Excellencies, we must redouble our efforts to rid the world of this inhuman scourge that is homelessness. Let me highlight some inclusive and practical steps in this regard. First, provision of adequate, accessible, and affordable housing, quality services, schools and health care, and decent jobs and livelihoods to help rebuild lives. Second, expansion of social protection systems to prevent people falling into homelessness due to shocks related to illness and job loss. And third, adoption of climate change mitigation measures, as well as measures to strengthen peace and security to build safe and accessible neighborhoods. Effectively addressing homelessness requires adequate policies and partnerships of governments, civil society, and faith-based organizations, philanthropic organizations, financial institutions and the private sector, and homeless people themselves. I'm very encouraged to know that this Commission has brought together many of these stakeholders. I'm confident that your deliberations will chart a bold and a practical path to bring hope and dignity to the millions of homeless people and people living in substandard shelters. Distinguished delegates, allow me to briefly highlight the follow-up to the Madrid Plan of Action on Aging. The fourth review and appraisal, which starts with the adoption of the modalities resolution at this session of the Commission, presents a unique opportunity. As the Second World Assembly on Aging approaches its 20-year milestone in 2022, it is vital now to generate renewed momentum to advance the aging agenda in the United Nations. I count on your continued support in this regard. Dear colleagues, in closing, I'd like to highlight that combating global health challenges is an important part of promoting social development. I invite you to spare a moment for those who are at the center of fighting the novel coronavirus. As the UN Secretary General has noted, such a fight requires international solidarity, our strong support to the people and the government of China and all other countries and people that are being impacted. I join the Secretary General and heads for all other UN and system entities in recognizing the resilience effort of China to combat this global health challenge. We in the UN system are prepared to offer strong support to the people and support to the people and the government of China in their fight against the outbreak of the novel coronavirus. We are confident that they will succeed in curbing the novel coronavirus very soon. I thank you again, and I look forward to your forthcoming deliberations and outcomes of this Commission session. I thank you.
I thank the Under-Secretary General of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs for his statement. I now welcome Mr. Daniel Perell. He's the chairperson of the NGO Committee on Social Development. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Undersecretary General, distinguished delegates, colleagues. This year of anniversaries at the United Nations provides us with an opportunity for deep and thoughtful reflection. And this is the first commission of the year, the first opportunity to consider what has contributed to progress made in recent decades and what will be required to overcome the challenges and seize the opportunities that lie ahead. 25 years ago, the World Summit on Social Development took place at the height of optimism about the future of the international order. Its landmark declaration advocated principles that remain unsurpassed even today. That social development and social justice are indispensable for the achievement and maintenance of peace and security. That societies must respond more effectively to the material and spiritual needs of individuals, their families, and the communities in which they live. That all individuals, especially those living in poverty, should exercise the rights, utilize the resources, and share the responsibilities that enable them to lead satisfying lives and to contribute to the well-being of their families, their communities, and humankind. Since that time, sustained progress toward the Declaration's central objectives of eradicating poverty, unemployment, and social exclusion has remained stubbornly elusive. A fundamental question thus faces those of us committed to the vision of social development. What will be required to overcome the obstacles that stand in the way of realizing those noble aims and aspirations? The drafters of the Declaration knew that the progress of any society cannot be divorced from the health of the relationships that sustain it, between individuals, communities, institutions, and nations. Today, those relationships unfold in a context of unprecedented interdependence. Challenges are increasingly planetary in scope, and growing numbers have therefore concluded that humanity ultimately rises, or falls as a single global family, and that the good of the part is now most lastingly and reliably achieved by working for the good of the whole. Awareness of this reality is growing, particularly in certain circles, climate change, environmental, and among the children and youth of the world. Yet UN spaces are often characterized not by recognition of our common humanity and our shared destiny, but by a culture of negotiation where national interest is paramount. Such an approach, though a commendable advance 75 years ago, is seeing its limits to adequately address the myriad challenges we face today. Reversing these trends will require those of us who enjoy the privilege of walking the halls of the UN to tend to others' needs as carefully as our own, including those of future generations. This, to me, is the heart of what the Copenhagen Declaration was saying. Its authors, advantaged as they might have been, were able to draw on the spirit of that historical moment to give voice to the well-being of populations who, up to that point, had received little attention. To transform personal and national motive is essential, and it will need to be accompanied by an equally robust transformation of institutional systems and structures. For many, inaction on global inequalities, fueled by the continuing inclination to accumulate more material resources than perceived rivals, is emblematic of the limitations of the current order. Arrangements of all kinds will therefore need to be reimagined in the context of humanity as a single, albeit diverse whole, each part contributing to its functioning and each deriving benefit from its well-being. The vital spirit of universalism and human solidarity that infuses the Copenhagen Declaration makes clear that the commitment to the oneness of humankind, with all its attendant implications, must be the starting point for all deliberations truly concerned with promoting the well-being of humanity. This is the necessary foundation for lasting progress. Dear colleagues, this year's Commission is, for the first time, squarely addressing homelessness, a challenge facing countless communities around the world. The Civil Society Declaration, involving input from civil society the world over, makes two clear requests. The first is to adopt a clear and universal definition of homelessness. Without such a definition, it is hard to measure, analyze, and assess homelessness in a given area. It is even more difficult to ensure that learning and insights generated in one community can be applied to another. The definition we propose is based on that which came out of the Nairobi Expert Group meeting held in May of 2019. The second request is to develop standardized measurements of homelessness. Without this, academic studies and policy evaluations are nearly impossible across jurisdictions. I would encourage you to read the declaration in full. In conclusion, this Commission focuses its inquiry on advancing the circumstances of those left furthest behind, and we commend the work done thus far in this regard. However, in light of the circumstances in which the world finds itself, we wish to encourage member states to find ways to use the tools at hand, such as this very body, which could and should be called upon to do much more, and to take advantage of this 75th anniversary to consider new approaches, to accelerate the implementation of Agenda 2030, and to contribute to the decade of action and delivery for sustainable development. I thank you.
I thank the Chairperson of the NGO Committee on Social Development for his statement. I now give the floor to a youth representative, Ms. Olivia Tangiayi, representative of the Yale International Relations Association. Madam, you have the floor.
Good morning, Chair, Under Secretary General, and esteemed guests. I'm Olivia Tangiayi, and I am here today as part of the Yale International Relations Association, speaking on behalf of the UN Major Group for Children and Youth, the General Assembly mandated space for young people at the UN. First, let us express our support of Mr. Perell's remarks, with whom we have worked a lot with in previous years. Now, 2020 marks the start of a new decade, a decade of action. In the past years, we've seen important improvements in many areas, a significant increase in the World's Human Development Index from 1990 to 2018, and a 36% decrease in world poverty levels within the same years. We celebrate these achievements, but are also aware of the growing inequalities, slow progress, and deeply rooted issues that systematically put profit over people and planet. We must also look forward to the challenges that face us in the coming decade with renewed ambition and a sense of urgency. In 2018, OECD countries saw a 34% housing cost overburden rate, where low-income private tenants were spending more than 40% of their income on rent. More worryingly, some OECD countries report a rise in youth homelessness, while several indicated homelessness among families with children. Even with all that we have done so far, in 2020, it seems like all our clocks are ticking with universal concerns like the climate emergency, public health issues, rising political divisions, and now increasingly homelessness amongst our youth and children. These groups are our future, and yet countries spend only 20% of their gross domestic product on social protection policies, most of which do not reach the youth. There is a need, an urgent one, to address the issue of housing. A roof over our heads and 4 solid warm walls are not a human luxury, but a necessity for a fulfilling life and decent livelihoods. It is a necessity that should be accessible and affordable to youth, children, people of all socioeconomic classes. Without a secure environment, the youth find it harder to develop emotional resilience, physical health, or even to have a peace of mind. These costs, slowly building, snowball into lower economic productivity, social malaise, and perhaps most regretfully, a defeated and distressed generation. Homelessness and poor social protection systems is a problem that faces us now, but its consequences will continue to haunt us for decades and generations to come. It is imperative that we invest in our youth now, through a concerted effort by member states and various UN entities to improve and prioritize accessibility. Robust social protection policies are an approach we can undertake to prevent the lifelong consequences of poverty and discrimination. Initiatives beginning from child development, such as financial aid for higher education, skills development, and nutritious food, ensure that the reduction of social inequality is long-term. The goal of these policies is simple: to provide every child with the same starting line, a fair chance in life, no matter what circumstances they were born into. However, the crux of the issue lies perhaps not just in the initiation of policies, but their execution and implementation. A report from the International Labour Organization found that only 35% of children worldwide enjoy effective access to social protection. This is in part due to lack of coordination between social protection policies. Disjointed policies that do not support the overall well-being of a child risk becoming unproductive. UNICEF illustrates with a simple example. Governments that fund programs to expand education but neglect those that tackle malnutrition may find that their children still struggle to attend school. A productive social policy scheme requires synchronization between various stakeholders and dedicated fiscal investment into the futures of our youth. Even as we gather here today in this room, our presence and concern is a testament to the optimism and abilities of many countries, policymakers, and civil society. I hope, as a youth myself, that the discussions in this commission will increase our capacity to target homelessness, inequality, and discrimination. It is with great hope that we usher in a decade of optimism and of action. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of youth for her statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Daniela Bass, Director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. She'll be introducing the documents under Agenda Item 3 and its sub-items A and B. Madam, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to everyone.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, and delegates, of course, ladies and gentlemen, I will present to you a few reports that we have prepared on behalf of the Secretary General. I would like first to draw your attention to the priority theme, the affordable housing and the social protection systems for all to address homelessness. This is the Secretary General report that you will find contained in document E/CN5/2020/3. A high-level panel discussion on this item is also scheduled for this afternoon, and an interactive dialogue will take place with senior officials of the United Nations systems, and that's going to be organized on Wednesday afternoon. And all of these will focus on the theme that is affordable housing and homelessness. The report contains an overview of the recent trends, and it looks at the universal trends, meaning developed and developing countries. And it provides an analysis of the drivers of homelessness, including structural causes, the impacts of personal and family circumstances, the climate-induced displacement, natural disasters, and conflicts. And in due course of reviewing and analyzing, special attention of this report was given to those social groups that are particularly vulnerable. And here we're talking about indigenous peoples, persons with disabilities, youth, older persons, the family as a whole, and women. Women and children often are those that have to face the most devastating effects of homelessness and affordable housing that is not always affordable. So in this report, you will find highlights in terms of policies and strategies that have proven to be successful, and examine also policy tools on affordable housing and social protection that can effectively address homelessness. So finally, the report encourages member states to develop comprehensive intersectoral national strategies and specific policy interventions to address all categories of homelessness, while implementing also existing frameworks and existing instruments that are related to homelessness. And here also you will find other thoughts about improved access to affordable housing, how to address the negative impact of the commercialization and financialization of housing, and strengthen national social protection policies and systems. And further, member states are also urged in the report of the Secretary General to build a broad-based partnership between states and non-state actors at all levels, and raise awareness of homelessness, address the specific needs of individuals and groups who are disproportionately affected, and combat discrimination and stereotypes against people who are experiencing homelessness. Mr. Chairman, I would like to pass to the second report now, which is about the national dimension of a new partnership for Africa development, which is contained in the document E/CN5/2020/3. And this report examines the progress in and challenges to social development in Africa, and it also discusses partnerships and resources mobilization, as well as the progress made in ensuring a coordinating implementation of the African Union Agenda 2063 with the 2030 Agenda and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The report also notes that these two agendas have produced social progress and really transformed the approach of African governments and their development partners towards the gaps and challenges related to social, economic, and political development in Africa. And over the past decade, progress has been made in such areas, and it really has improved the living standards and governance. However, progress remains slow and uneven, especially in the overarching goal of eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, and really ensuring that no one is left behind. So going forward, the report urges African countries to continue prioritizing policies and strategies that spur inclusive and sustainable growth through structural transformation, eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, combat inequality and create decent jobs for all, and championing sound governance and the provision of public goods and services such as universal education, universal health coverage, social protection, including floors, basic services and infrastructures that every citizen has the right to enjoy. The report finally encourages the United Nations system to assist and support countries in their efforts to implement Africa's development priorities as set out in the Agenda 2063 and the Agenda 2030. Mr. Chairman, I would like now to share the outcomes of another report entitled Review of Relevant United Nations Plans and Programs of Action Pertaining to the Situation of Social Groups. And this report of the Secretary General is entitled Modalities for the Fourth Review and Appraisal of the Implementation of the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging of 2002. And it is contained in the document E/CN5/2020/4, and it provides an overview of the modalities for the fourth review and appraisal of the implementation of the Madrid Plan of Action on Aging, which is going to approach its 20th year milestone. So this is going to be the fourth review and appraisal to provide a unique opportunity in order to generate renewed momentum for international action to advance the aging agenda. The world is aging fast. There are more older people than youth. We really have to take action. And the report presents an update of relevant activities of the United Nations system on aging and opportunities to advance the implementation of the Madrid Plan of Action on Aging has been highlighted in this report. Mr. Chairman, the next report I would like to draw the attention of the Commission to is on the implementation of the objectives of the International Year of Family and its follow-up processes, which is contained in document A/75/61-E/2020/4. The report highlights recent family trends with a focus on issues that are pertaining to this session of the Commission. That is homelessness and how it impacts families. Sometimes families may face homelessness on a temporary basis, and other times, unfortunately, it becomes chronic. So what happens to the family, which is the first key cell of communities where we live? So this is what the Secretary General report is focusing on. Social transfers are key to reducing poverty in single-parent households, and mostly these single-parent households are headed by women and child, and also it focuses on family-related allowances that have been gaining traction worldwide. However, there is also a growing recognition that cash transfers should be backed by broader investments in health, education, childcare, as well as accessible and affordable infrastructures, including housing. If they're not accessible, not only in terms of rent, but also accessible in terms of people who might be old or people with the disabling conditions or persons with disabilities, if housing is not accessible, these are left behind and they become homeless. So family homelessness appears to be on the rise and really deserves more attention. And most likely to poverty and loss of employment, family homelessness is chronic or can become chronic. And it may lead to trauma if not addressed and can really leave lifelong negative implications, especially for the development of children. Effective strategies tackling family homelessness homelessness include prevention measures that are dealing also with domestic violence. Rapid rehousing and sound policy protection policies for families and children are needed, especially for those that are headed by women. And importantly, a well-functioning family is an enabler of social protection, and family-oriented policies and programs supporting numerous family functions can be critical for poverty reduction, promotion of gender equality, and the advancement of work-family balance and prevention of family homelessness. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I would like to introduce also the last report about emerging issues. This year's theme is 25 years of the World Summit for Social Development, addressing emerging societal challenges to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This report of the Secretary General is contained in the document E/CN5/2020/5, and it has been prepared to facilitate consideration of this theme. Further, a ministerial forum on this item is scheduled for tomorrow morning. So the note of the Secretary General reviews some global megatrends of these last 25 years since the Copenhagen Summit, and the important challenges that represent the societal level for the implementation also of the 2030 Agenda. So the focus on the issues and trends most relevant to the three core objectives of social development identified in the World Social Summit are poverty eradication, promotion of productive employment and decent work for all, and the promotion of social integration and inclusion. And these challenges include the changes in demographic dynamics, high and rising inequality, ongoing effects of climate change and natural disasters, rapid technological change and its impact on the future of work, and backlash against globalization. Such societal challenges bear significant impact on shared economy prosperity, and broadly the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. They have also had a major impact on the ability of countries to implement the World Social Summit and its objectives over the past 25 years. And it is noted that overcoming these challenges to enact actions to accelerate progress of the Sustainable Development Goals will be supported by the reaffirmation of the vision of people-centered development and the principles of equity and social justice that are articulated in the World Summit for Social Development. They have been articulated in Copenhagen 25 years ago. The importance of the World Summit for Social Development 25 years later is precisely in its value as a platform to launch a decade of action for realizing the Sustainable Development Goals for all people of all ages and of all abilities. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, this concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Je remercie la directrice.
I thank the Director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development for her statement. We'll now make a short pause to change the panelists.
Mesdames les représentantes,
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue our work.
j'invite à présent
I now invite the Commission to begin its general discussion of sub-items A and B of item 3 of the agenda, entitled Priority Theme, Affordable Housing and Social Protection Systems for All to Address Homelessness, and Review of the relevant United Nations plans and programs of action pertaining to the situation of social groups. Before giving the floor to the first speaker, I would like to remind all delegations to kindly respect the agreed time limits. A digital speech timer is visible on the screen to assist the speakers in managing their time. The digits on the display will turn red 1 minute before the expiration of the time limit. Moreover, the red light on the microphone will start blinking when 1 minute is remaining. Having said that, I now call on the first speaker on my list, Her Excellency Ms. Vesna Bedekovic, Minister of Social Policy, Youth and Demography of Croatia, who will speak on behalf of the European Union.
Madame.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The candidate countries, Turkey, the Republic of North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Albania, the country of the stabilization and association process, and potential candidate Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as Ukraine, Republic of Moldova, and Georgia, align themselves with this statement. And first of all, we would like to thank the Bureau and the Department of Economic and Social Affairs for the preparatory work carried out in advance of this session. In 2020, we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and 25th anniversary of the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development. 2020 needs to be a crucial year for the Commission for Social Development and for the social dimension of the 2030 Agenda. The new European Commission took office on 1st December, and its new President, Ursula von der Leyen, has made sustainability an overriding political priority for the Commission, and people's well-being is at the center of our political agenda. Achieving prosperity and social fairness is a fundamental promise on which the European Union has to deliver. The new European Commission will put forward an action plan after a broad consultation with all EU member states, regional and local authorities, social partners, and other parts of civil society to fully implement the European pillar of the social rights. Its 20 principles aim at improving equal opportunities and jobs for all, fair working conditions, and social protection and inclusion. Implementing them upholds our commitment that people are the center of our policies and that no one is left behind. The European Commission aims at a strong social Europe for just transitions with a fair minimum wage that allows for a decent living and inclusive economy for all, regardless of age, gender, origin, or disability, a strong social dialogue, high social protection, and improved working conditions on platform workers. The first stage consultation of EU social partners on how to ensure fair minimum wage for workers in the EU has already been launched. The European Commission will also present proposals on a European unemployment reinsurance scheme, reinforce youth guarantee and child guarantee. It will work with member states towards extending adequate social protection to all workers. The EU will foster social fairness in the rest of the world, and our international cooperation, development and trade policies aim at contributing to sustainable growth, decent jobs and prosperity, and supports sustainable development. Every new comprehensive bilateral trade agreement will have a dedicated Sustainable Development Chapter and the high standards of climate, environmental, and labor protection with a zero-tolerance approach on the child labor. We welcome the priority theme for this session and putting the focus on affordable housing and social protection solutions to fight homelessness. The analysis of trends and drivers carried out in the report prepared by the Secretary General has put in evidence common challenges that the Union shares with other developed and developing regions. Homelessness is on the rise in most EU member states. The European Pillar of Social Rights includes a principle dedicated to housing and assistance for homeless, which sets the bar high by promoting the reintegration of homeless people into society by means of enabling social service. This is a clear political signal for the importance that the Union attaches to the fight against homelessness and housing exclusion. The Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU stipulates that the Union recognizes and respects the right to social and housing assistance as well as ensure a decent existence for all those who lack sufficient resources in accordance with community law and national laws and practices. The Union supports its member states in the fight against homelessness and housing exclusion. A good way to reduce homelessness and housing exclusion is to support member states in the implementation of preventive policies which combine housing-led policies and policies for social inclusion. They allow long-term social and economic benefits, including lower public expenditure. Young people continue to be the heart of the EU's preoccupations, and since 2013, the Youth Guarantee, the structural framework to tackle youth unemployment and inactivity, has been implemented by the EU and its member states. In 2013, member states committed to make a good quality offer of employment, continued education and traineeships for all people under 25 within a period of 4 months of becoming unemployed and or leaving formal education. In 2013, the youth unemployment rate was 24% in the EU and over 50% in some member states, with 7.5 million young people aged 15 to 24 not in employment, education or training. Now, the youth employment rate is down to 14%, and there are 2 million fewer young people not in employment, education or training. Every year, more than 3.5 million young people receive a youth guarantee offer. The EU and its member states strongly support the youth delegates programs, with 26 out of 36 youth delegates to the 7th fourth session of the General Assembly being from the EU. And however, despite the improved situation, the youth unemployment rate in the EU, it's still double general unemployment rate, 6.3%, and certain groups of the young population are disproportionate disadvantage. Also, ongoing technological developments such as automation and digitalization, as well as the transition towards a greener economy, are reshaping the world of work and bring new challenges. Young people will need support to make the most of the new opportunities. For these reasons, we will reinforce the youth guarantee to ensure that it is in line with evolving needs and changing labor markets. Equality, including gender equality, is high on the political agenda of the EU. The situation of women on labor market merits particular attention. Despite high levels of educational attainment, there are less women than men in paid employment, they work less hours, their careers are shorter and more interrupted, and their salaries and pensions are lower. We are strongly committed to removing obstacles to the participation of women in the labor market. And EU Directive of Work-Life Balance for Parents and Carers entered into force last year, and the European Commission will support member states in the smooth transposition process. In March, the European Commission will propose a new European gender equality strategy, which also aims at closing the gender, employment, and pay and pension gap. Population aging is a key challenge guiding EU social policy. Pension reforms in the past 10 years have ensured sustainability and especially recently sought to maintain the adequacy of pensions. More needs to be done to prepare for a rapid increase in the number of older people. Older people are becoming less poor, healthier and more active for the benefit of the whole society, but much more can still be done towards this goal. To better understand and respond to the impact of demographic change, the European Commission will present a report on the impact of demographic change and a green paper of aging in 2020. The European Union, as a party to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Persons with Disabilities, continues to mainstream disability issues in the actions combat unemployment and works towards their full participation in society and an equal basis with others. The evaluation of the European Disability Strategy 2010-2020 in order to take stock of the implementation of the Convention in the EU and assess the effectiveness of the strategy to that end in progressing well, and results are expected by mid-2020. Recognizing that persons with disabilities continue to face difficulties in getting education and training, employment, social protection systems, and health care, the Commission just announced that it will present improved strategy for disability in 2021. The European Accessibility Act, legislation that harmonizes accessibility requirements in the EU to facilitate access for persons with disabilities to essential goods and services in the single market has been adopted last year. We also take very seriously the global challenges ahead. In this respect, we hope that the European consensus on development will continue to be a key instrument to support social development around the world. The EU consensus on development, which has poverty eliminations at its primary objective, seeks to support the achievement of all 17 Sustainable Development Goals in an integrated manner. It states that the EU and its member states will promote gender equality and will implement a rights-based approach to development, including all human rights. It also proves our intention to work more strongly and effectively with all our partners, including new relationship and creating, and this includes countries at all stages of development. We will continue to target our assistance to the least developed and conflict-affected countries, and we will also strengthen our partnerships with middle-income countries. They will be critical in achieving the 2030 Agenda and for addressing major risks that affect social inclusion and social cohesion, such as rising inequalities within many countries. In that respect, universal social protection, which is a strong value of the European Union, has a key role to play, and the EU stands ready to assist partner countries in adapting, expanding and improving their social protection system in a sustainable way. Thank you so much.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Vesna Bedekovic, Minister for Social Policy, Youth and Demography of Croatia, who spoke on behalf of the European Union. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Michael Ten Po, Permanent Representative of Guyana, who is speaking on behalf of the Group of 77 and China.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. Allow me first to extend our warmest congratulations to you and the other members of the Bureau on your election. The group commits our full support and cooperation for the success of your work. I would also like to express the group's appreciation to the Secretary General for the comprehensive reports which will contribute to our deliberations in the days ahead, and to the USG of DESA, Mr. Liu, for the hard work done by his department in preparation for this 58th session of the Commission. Mr. Chairman, the importance of this year cannot be overstated, as it marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and of the Commission on Social Development. It is also the 25th anniversary of the World Summit for Social Development, which augured an historic consensus on the need to put people at the center of development. 25 years later, the summit outcomes continue to serve as a touchstone for social development. The group reaffirms its commitment to fulfilling the goals outlined in the Copenhagen Declaration and Program of Action adopted in 1995, particularly poverty eradication, promotion of full and productive employment, and the fostering of social inclusion. Mr. Chair, this Commission likewise has served the interests of all countries and particularly the members of the Group of 77. It is the place where we can give effect to our universal commitment to leave no one behind. We reiterate our steadfast support for its work and for the fundamental principles that the Commission serves. We also welcome the Commission's consideration of the theme of affordable housing and social protection systems for all to address homelessness. We recognize its inherent connection with the achievement of the SDGs and the goals outlined in the Copenhagen Declaration and Program of Action. Among other goals, Agenda 2030 aims to ensure access for all to adequate, safe, and affordable housing and to basic services, as well as to upgrade slums. Regrettably, and notwithstanding the significant inroads made in addressing homelessness, statistics reveal that the levels of homelessness have progressively risen during the past decade. The data also confirm that homelessness is one of the most glaring symptoms of the lack of access to education, health, and productive employment, poverty, inequality, and social exclusion. In our search for solutions, it is necessary to consider the multiple causes and consequences of homelessness, the challenges faced by homeless persons, and its effects on individuals and societies. The Secretary General's report amply underscores this point, noting that homelessness affects people of all ages, genders, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Therefore, building on the recommendations of the previous session of this Commission, which addressed inequalities and challenges to social inclusion, lies at the heart of efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This must be underpinned by continued international and domestic efforts to eradicate poverty. Poverty eradication remains our highest priority and one of our greatest challenges. This is particularly true as the effects of climate change, food insecurity, armed conflict, slowing global economic growth, humanitarian emergencies, and global health threats all serve to undermine and impede efforts in this direction. The Group of 77 and China recognize that effective social protection systems, improved infrastructure, participatory governance, and sustained economic growth are vital to poverty eradication. Mr. Chairman, the attainment of this target requires international cooperation at every level. It is on this basis that the group reiterates the role of cooperation and genuine partnerships between all stakeholders, including North-South, South-South, and triangular cooperation to support national efforts to fight inequality and eradicate poverty, and to realize the commitments made 25 years ago in Copenhagen, as well as those contained in the 2030 Agenda. We emphasize the importance of scaling up the mobilization of resources for sustainable development, including through official development assistance, innovative financing, support for capacity building, technology transfers, and trade, among others. In addition, the group strongly supports the African Union's social agenda of the new Partnership for Africa's Development and Agenda 2063. Mr. Chair, the group expresses its full support to the comprehensive efforts made by the government of China to contain the outbreak of the novel coronavirus and recognizes China's efforts in extending cooperation with the international community. The group emphasizes that the international community should work together in a spirit of responsibility, transparency, solidarity, and cooperation, and avoid the spread of discrimination, stigma, and disinformation in order to bring this outbreak under control as fast as possible. The group emphasizes the important role of the World Health Organization in global public health preparedness and response, and calls for respect for the professional guidance of the WHO regarding containment of the outbreak. In closing, Mr. Chairman, the Group of 77 in China wishes to reaffirm the vital work of the Commission on Social Development in continuously assessing the implementation of the Copenhagen outcomes, providing guidance for SDG implementation and follow-up on the 2030 agenda, particularly in view of the widening challenges facing the global community. We trust that the discussions and recommendations of the 58th session of the Commission will greatly contribute to the achievement of our shared aspirations. I thank you.
I thank the Permanent Representative of Guyana, His Excellency Mr. Michael Tenpo, for his declaration. And I would like to, on behalf of the Bureau, to express deep appreciation and full support to the high-level political commitment and extraordinary efforts made by the government of China to fight the outbreak of the novel coronavirus. I would like to join the Secretary General to call for international solidarity and cooperation to contain this outbreak. I am confident that with efforts of China and other countries collectively, the outbreak can be brought under control as soon as possible.
I would now like to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Vitavas Chivihok, the Permanent Representative of Thailand, who is speaking on behalf of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations.
I have the honor to speak on behalf of the 10 member states of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, namely Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos People's Democratic Republic, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. ASEAN allies itself with the statement delivered by Guyana on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. We would like to express our appreciation to the Secretary General for his report on the priority theme, affordable housing and social protection system for all to address homelessness, which provides an analysis and recommendations relating to affordable housing and social protection, including policies targeting vulnerable groups. Since the adoption of the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development and the Program of Action of the World Summit for Social Development, countries have made significant progress in reducing poverty, as well as in other social dimensions of development. Nevertheless, the world continues to face major persistent challenges, as well as new ones, in all dimensions of sustainable development. 2020 is a crucial year to accelerate our actions as we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development. ASEAN has made much progress in reducing poverty and advancing economic growth through vibrant trade and investment. As ASEAN's economies further integrate themselves into global markets, ASEAN continues to develop, and today, half of all people in ASEAN live in urban areas, and an additional 90 million people are forecasted to move to cities by the year 2030. Addressing rapid urbanization requires comprehensive, intersectoral policy frameworks and housing strategies in alignment with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In this regard, we would like to share some of ASEAN's experience in developing and implementing our regional policies framework in an effort to ensure affordable housing and social protection system for all. ASEAN Human Rights Declaration 2012 recognized that every person has the right to an adequate standard of living, including the right to adequate and affordable housing. Since 2015, ASEAN has been mobilizing our efforts to uplift the standard of living of the region's peoples, guided by the framework of the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 and the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. With this continuing trend of urbanization, the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Blueprint 2025, as well as the Master Plan on ASEAN Connectivity 2025, are the main mechanisms directing efforts toward creating sustainable urbanization and more environmental sustainable cities. At national level, ASEAN members have developed and improved access to affordable housing through various efforts, such as launching state-owned affordable housing projects and introducing stimulus package to encourage social housing development. At regional level, the ASEAN Sustainable Urbanization Strategy, adopted by ASEAN leaders at the 29th ASEAN Summit in September 2016, aimed to comprehensively assist local governments in ASEAN to advance sustainable urbanization in their cities. ASEAN cities are also aiming to be smart, sustainable cities to promote economic and social development alongside environmental protection. Mr. Chair, while ASEAN is working towards sustainable urban development, we also continue to promote livelihood in rural areas. ASEAN Framework Action Plan on Rural Development and Poverty Eradication 2016 to 2020 was developed to improve vulnerable groups and poor households' access to and control of productive natural resources, financial and support services, and to social protection as a foundation for building capable, resilient, and self-sustaining households and community. Guided by people-centered set of sustainable development goals and targets, including target 1.3 and 11.1, to ensure access for all to adequate, safe, and affordable housing and basic services, as well as the new urban agenda goals of realizing the right to adequate housing for all. ASEAN is committed to enhancing the well-being and improving the quality of life of all people, including older persons, children, women, youth, persons with disabilities, and other vulnerable groups. In addition, ASEAN Declaration on Strengthening Social Protection, adopted in 2018, advocates strategies that promote the coverage, quality, equitability, affordability, and sustainability of various social protection services, including greater access to social protection programs and services, including vocational training, as part of active labor market interventions and human resource development. Most recently, joint ministerial statement of the 21st ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Councils, adopted on 17 May 2019, reaffirmed ASEAN member state commitment to promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all in the context of transformative changes such as technological advances, demographic transition, and green economy. Last but not least, emergency shelters and temporary housing preparation are crucial as ASEAN is prone to natural disaster. The ASEAN Declaration on One ASEAN, One Response, ASEAN responding to disaster as one, in the region and outside the region, adopted in 2016, demonstrates ASEAN commitment to enhancing ASEAN capabilities and coordination in disaster management and emergency response. Mr. Chair, ASEAN is committed to raising the standards of living of our peoples, empowering them to seize opportunities and address the challenges they will face in the coming years. Creating sustainable and affordable housing in ASEAN will be crucial to narrowing the existing development gaps, strengthening resilience, promoting innovation, improving well-being, and enhancing connectivity among our peoples. As we mark the 25th anniversary of the Copenhagen Summit, ASEAN reaffirms our commitment to further strengthen mutual cooperation and assistance at global, regional, and bilateral levels, to narrow the development gap, embrace new technologies and innovations, to best serve our people's interests, and ensure equitable access for all to social protection. Mr. Chair, as we also mark the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and begin the decade of action and delivery for sustainable development this year, ASEAN will play our part in enhancing the Commission's vital role in further accelerating our actions and progress and effectively addressing today's challenges. Through the Commission for Social Development, we can highlight the importance of strengthening collaboration between the United Nations and member states through the exchange of information and expertise, capacity building activities, technical support, and intersectoral dialogue to promote cooperation, to help address common challenges. Mutual cooperation is of vital importance to ensure the realization of our ambitious goals in the 2030 Agenda. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Je remercie.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Vitavas Shrivihak, Permanent Representative of Thailand, who spoke on behalf of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Boshit Edmond, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of the Republic of Haiti to the United Nations, speaking on behalf of CARICOM.
Mr. Chair, I have the honor to deliver the statement on behalf of the member states of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, at this 58th session of the Commission for Social Development. At the outset, CARICOM aligns itself with the statement delivered by the distinguished representative of Guyana on behalf of the Group 77 and China. Allow me to extend our congratulations to you and the members of the Bureau for your election. We can assure you of our support during your tenure. We thank the Secretary General for his comprehensive report, which will most definitely assist in enriching the discussions during this session. Mr. Chair, 2020 marks a milestone year for us as a global community as we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, as well as the 25th anniversary of the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development. We must ensure, through our union commitments, that this year is not just a celebratory one, but also a transformative one. Since the World Summit for Social Development 25 years ago, we have been consistently working to empower our people in order to maximize their capacities, resources, and opportunities recognizing the importance of people-centered, inclusive development. During this period, progress has been achieved in reducing poverty, entirely through improvements in social dimensions of development, such as the provision of good health and quality education. Despite the progress achieved, there is still much more to be done as inequality widens. Mr. Chair, addressing inequality is essential to eradicating poverty, and it left unabated will create further challenges such as homelessness. For already uniquely vulnerable countries, homelessness is not an isolated issue. On the contrary, it is a worldwide problem which affects persons of diverse economic, social, and cultural backgrounds. The ethos of what we collectively strive for is to leave no one behind. In this regard, we welcome the fact that the problem of homelessness is being brought to the fore of the session of the Commission. This will allow us to have healthy discussion on a long-standing issue and to find solutions to help those in such vulnerable situations. The structural causes of homelessness are multifold. While inequality and poverty are among the foremost causes of homelessness, the adverse effects of climate change can also place persons in a state of homelessness, although on a temporary basis or for a prolonged period. Mr. Chair, our vulnerability as small island development state places us at a much greater risk to natural disasters and the possibility of being driven out from our homes as a result of our natural disasters, including earthquakes, droughts, storms, and flooding. In recent times, we have faced more frequent and intense hurricanes that obliterate homes and social infrastructure, wipe out agricultural land, and hamper the delivery of essential services, leaving our economies in a state of despair. For instance, losses that exceed 100% of our GDP. We recall the devastation caused by hurricanes Dorian, Matthew, Irma, and Maria, as well as the earthquake in Haiti 10 years ago. The loss of lives from such harrowing catastrophes are truly regrettable, but so is the loss of homes, which reflects a stark reality that far too many were faced with. We note with grave concern from the Secretary General report that disasters stemming from natural hazard have displaced an average of almost 24 million people each year over the last decade and damaged over 9 million homes between 2005 and 2017. This is cause for alarm and demands that we continue the discussion and take action to further address the impacts of climate change, especially given the vulnerabilities and associated challenges that seeds continue to encounter. In the aftermath of natural disasters that causes loss of homes and displacement of families, the focus is on the state to ensure that emergency shelters are equipped to provide the physical and psychosocial services needed during this crucial period. In many of our countries, schools, churches, and community centers are often used as emergency shelters. The task is to then assist in the transition from shelter to abode and to ensure that the primary function of the emergency shelter is not gravely hindered. There is also a need to bolster the framework of mental health professionals and social workers to provide the necessary support were required. Whereas providing housing is the immediate and long-term solution, it is also important that emotional, mental, and societal needs, as well as the stigmatization of persons who are in a state of homelessness, are also addressed. Therefore, addressing homelessness through a multifaceted approach means that we are working towards not just one specific goal, but on the contrary, we will also be addressing interrelated SDGs, including SDGs 1, 3, 4, 8, 10, and 11. Mr. Chair, in our growing efforts to build resilience as a measure to address homelessness, CARICOM member states have been guided by the CARICOM Strategic Plan 2015-2019, which espouses a multi-sectorial approach to resilience. Additionally, we are also guided by the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction and other mutually reinforcing 2030 Agenda commitments. The Paris Agreement on Climate Change, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda on Financing for Development, and the New Urban Agenda. As we enter this decade of action, CARICOM remains strongly committed to building resilience to assist us to meet our SDG targets, but also to reduce risk and vulnerabilities for those countries. However, we cannot do it alone. Partnerships, development, financing, including climate financing, will aptly assist us in building resilience to mitigate the effects of climate change, as well as to address inequality through measures such as providing affordable housing to curb homelessness. Mr. Chair, homelessness can disproportionately affect children, youth, women, persons with disabilities, people living with HIV/AIDS, older persons, indigenous people, and other persons who are in vulnerable situations. It is that support be given to empower them to ensure their full participation in the societies in which they live in. CARICOM has and will continue to empower our people by strengthening our national social protection policies and system. Through this, we aim to empower them as both beneficiaries and agents of change and the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Our aim is to create an enabling environment so that in addressing homelessness, the provision of affordable housing is not just a temporary solution, but a sustainable one. In many of our countries, civil society and the private sector have played active roles in assisting the homeless. We recognize and commend their engagements as we take heed that the whole of society approach will be needed to fundamentally address homelessness. Mr. Chair, CARICOM looks forward to our continuing collaboration with the Commission, and we welcome this timely dialogue, which allows for an assessment of policies related to the implementation of social development, which is the key of attainment of sustainable development. We therefore support greater synergies between the work and the Commission and our efforts to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as well as the wider SEEDS agenda. And these agendas are inextricably linked. As we commemorate the 75th anniversary of our United Nations, we take stock of our commitment to transforming our world to leave no one behind, including those who are homeless. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Boshit Edmond, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Haiti, who spoke on behalf of the CARICOM nations. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Maria de Jesus Ferreira, a permanent representative of Angola, who will be speaking on behalf of the African Group.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning.
Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, on behalf of the African Group, allow me to thank the Bureau for the excellent manner in which it is steering the work of this Commission. The Group aligns its statements with the statement delivered by the delegation of Guyana on behalf of the G77 and China on the priority theme, affordable housing and social protection systems for all to address homelessness. We thank the Secretary General for the reports under this agenda item, and we take note of their recommendations contained in the theme. Mr. Chairman, our countries and the cities grow at unprecedented rates, setting the economic, social, political, cultural, and environmental trends of the world. Sustainable urbanization is one of the most pressing challenges facing the global community today. We held the United Nations General Assembly agreement for establishing UN Habitat to promote economically, social, and environmentally sustainable towns and cities with the goal of providing adequate shelter for all. We recognize that while there are a number of contributing factors, homelessness is mainly driven by structural causes, including inequalities and poverty among and between the countries. Mr. Chairman, we affirm that in developing countries, poverty, especially in rural poverty, is the main driver of homelessness. Lack of livelihood and access to basic service in rural areas are pushing people, mostly men, out of rural homes, initially temporarily, to find jobs in cities or towns to send remittance home, while booming urban development acts as a pull factor for whole families to migrate into urban areas for better economic and social opportunities. Rural to urban migration has accelerated in recent years as a result of more frequent and intensified droughts, floods, and storms, which have made traditional farming methods unsustainable in some cases because subsistence farmers have been pushed off from their land by large companies investing in rural agriculture. Furthermore, ill-planned urban expansion and development are also pushing poor local residents out of their homes or agriculture-based jobs. They have no choice but to migrate to the cities to sustain their livelihoods. It is important that development initiatives embrace the social protection efforts to ensure guaranteed basic income security through employment creation and access to essential social services, including sustainable, affordable housing. Mr. Chairman, we are concerned that as of 2018, an estimated of 23.5% of the world's urban population live in slums. This number is projected to increase. The pace of urbanization is expected to accelerate in the future, with the number of city dwellers anticipated to increase from 4 billion in 2015 to 5.1 billion in 2030. Africa and Asia are expected to account for nearly 60% of the increase. Africa is also recognized as the less urbanized, yet the fastest urbanizing continent in the world, with an additional 300 million new cities dwellers. Without adequate policy and strategy, rapid urbanization will exacerbate land shortage and intensify informal land supply, leading to proliferation of slums and informal settlements, the overburdening of infrastructure and services, and deepening of urban poverty. All of these projections indicate a growing number of homeless people, including those living in inadequate housing, is estimated to reach 3 billion in 2030. There is therefore a need to develop data to identify people experiencing homelessness and ensure their inclusion on official statistics so that effective interventions and appropriate measures are taken. Mr. Chairman, we recognize that social and demographic changes also act as drivers of homelessness. Such changes, when coupled with the lack of a formal welfare program, affect housing security of more vulnerable people. Child-needed households, mental health, domestic violence, discrimination against people because of their family status, such as divorce, separation, widowhood, and abandonment, among others, also lead to homelessness among women, adolescents, and youth. Eviction is also a direct cause of homelessness. It disproportionately affects economically disadvantaged, especially adolescents, youth, women, and men who are financially dependent. In this regard, inclusive and responsive all of society approach and development-oriented policies, particularly family-oriented intervention development policies and programs, earmarked to the family as a fundamental unit of society remain paramount and critical. Mr. Chairman, we realize that addressing homelessness requires comprehensive intersectoral policy frameworks and rights-based housing strategies in alignment with 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The structural causes of homelessness should be effectively addressed through partnerships, legal, financial, political, environmental, economic, and social policy responses at all levels. Appropriate types of policy interventions should be made for each category of homelessness and by distinguishing between chronic and transitional homelessness. It is concerning that globally the 60 fastest growing housing markets have a shortage of 35 million units of affordable housing, and sub-Saharan Africa alone accounts for over 3.4 million units. In this regard, we applaud the African Union commitment in the Common African Position on Habitat III on African Union Agenda 2063 to make the continent prosperous with the means and resources to drive its own development with sustainable and long-term stewardship of its resources, and where, among others, cities and other settlements are hubs of cultural and economic activities with modernized infrastructure, and the people have access to affordable and decent housing, including housing financed together with all the basic necessities of life such as water, sanitation, energy, public transport, and ICT. In this connection, we are putting special emphasis on the support of a new Partnership for Africa Development, NEPAD, as an initiative to push forward the implementation of social and economic development agenda in Africa, and we call on our partners to lend their support in sustaining financing for development efforts in this regard. Mr. Chairman, people can become homeless temporarily or for prolonged periods as a result of conflicts or disasters. We recognize that at the end of 2018, nearly 70.8 million people were forcibly displaced worldwide. Climate change has heightened the risk of disaster-related displacement and homelessness. Armed conflicts also contribute to homelessness as they lead to people becoming refugees and internal displaced persons. It is concerning that in 2018, in sub-Saharan Africa alone, nearly 2.6 billion people were forced to flee their homes as a result of drought, floods, or cyclones. It is also estimated that sea level rise resulting from climate change could displace 280 million people in a generation. The The adoption of national and local disaster risk reduction strategies by 2020 has called for the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-2030 is essential to reduce disaster risk. Such strategies should be consistent with the National Adaptation and Resilience Plan for Climate Action. Effective disaster risk reduction can build resilience to reduce the risk of prepare for and respond to disaster displacement and other related forms of human mobility. While emergency shelters are temporary housing and crucial and a breakthrough for those displaced by disaster or conflicts, relocation assistance for their transition to permanent housing should be provided as quickly as possible to shorten the time spent homeless. It is therefore imperative that international community honor their development commitments, including the effective and full implementation of a Addis Ababa Action Agenda, overseas development assistance, ODA, transfer of technology, and mutual agreed terms marked assess that the Paris Agreement and the Copenhagen Declaration and Program of Action. Mr. Chairman, in concluding, we note that the mistake between affordable housing supply and growing demand caused by an increase in urban population strategy wages, erosion and purchasing power in the housing market, rent bikes, and the shortage of affordable housing has created a homeless crisis in many areas around the world. The rise in housing costs, coupled with stringent wages, creates a huge gap to the point that the active class can no longer access affordable housing in major cities across regions. It is our view that there is a need for appropriate regulation and better management of housing markets and for zoning towards social economic inclusion and equality, addressing inequalities and poverty among and between countries and communities remaining critically important. The world's ability to meet the housing needs of the global urban population is currently outpaced by the rate of urbanization. Residential land use occupies 60 to 70% of the surface area of cities, yet 1 billion people in cities around the world lack secure land rights. These rights bring with them the freedom to live without fear of eviction. It is our duty, therefore, to uphold the dignity, integrity, equality, and equity of making by ensuring that all citizens have a decent shelter. Let us join hands individually and collectively and live to make men free. I thank you, Mr. President. Thank you all.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Maria de Jesus Ferreira, the Permanent Representative of Angola, who spoke on behalf of the African Group. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Cynthia Morrison, Minister of Gender, Children and Social Protection from Ghana.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, it is an honor to address the 58th session of this commission and to congratulate you and your members of this Bureau on your election. My delegation is very confident that your leadership and rich experience will ensure a rewarding and successful outcome of this session, and I wish to assure you of my delegation's full support and cooperation. Ghana aligns itself with the statement delivered by Guyana on behalf of the G77 and Angola on behalf of the African Group. Mr. Chairman, the World Summit for Social Development held in Copenhagen in 1995, where 117 heads of state consented to put people at the center of development, had goals to make conquest of poverty, promote full productive employment, and social integration. These goals are still relevant today. The theme for this session, affordable housing and social protection systems for all to address homelessness, is therefore very relevant and resonates well with the government of Ghana's vision to create a Ghana where every citizen has access to affordable housing and social protection initiatives. This underscores the fact that poverty eradication has over the years been ultimate priority to all, and as all present here today are cognizant, major strides have been made in our bid to eliminate poverty and its related vulnerabilities. However, a lot still needs to be done. Mr. Chairman, the government of Ghana is working assiduously and relentlessly to ensure its citizens live dignified lives and has over years implemented monumental social protection programs. Projects and interventions aimed at ensuring every Ghanaian is empowered to fully contribute to the national development agenda. These, coupled with strong economic growth, have contributed to the decline of poverty incidence over the period. Poverty incidence declined significantly in Ghana since 1991. Thus, poverty and extreme poverty incidence reduced from 56.5% and 18.2% in 2002 and 3 respectively, to 23.4% and 8.2%, 2.4 million Ghanaians in 2016 and 2017. Mr. Chairman, Ghana, like many other countries in the development world, has housing challenges. The government of Ghana has identified housing as a critical factor in ensuring social stability and national security. The government of Ghana has therefore recently commenced the construction of 250,000 affordable housing units nationwide. As part of the measures to reduce the barest minimum and housing deficits the country is faced with, Ghana has prioritized assets and affordability to mortgages facilities by all classes of salary earners via a number of measures, including the introduction of the National Credible Mortgage Program. It is worth noting that the housing sector interventions also includes the upgrading of all slums into modern communities. This is in line with the government's vision of bridging development gaps in inner cities and Zongo communities. This, the government believes, would go a long way to guarantee the attainment of the SDG Goal 11 by 2030, and to achieve a Ghana where no one is left behind and all Ghanaians have access to adequate, safe, and affordable housing schemes. Additionally, I am glad to inform that the Ghana government has commenced plans to build a 600-bed Kayaye, that is the headquarters hostel at Agbogloshi, a suburb in Accra, where majority of headquarters who migrate from the northern part of Ghana for greener pastures reside. The facility will provide accommodation and skill training to those young women who are exposed to all sorts of abuse and danger due to lack of safe housing for them and their children. Mr. Chairman, the government of Ghana is continually committed to ensuring effective social protection systems that can guarantee and contribute to the realization of a sustainable development goal and several national agendas. In that regard, appropriate legislation has been initiated to cater for social protection, aged persons, affirmative action, and non-governmental organizations that seeks to promote sustainable and effective implementation of various policies. As recently stated by His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, the President of the Republic of Ghana and the co-chair of the SDGs Advocates, I quote, "This is a time of great hope for all the world. If we work smartly together and stay on course, we can raise millions out of poverty and significantly expand basic social services for many more by 2030, end date of the Sustainable Development Goals," I unquote. This agenda therefore requires responsive, dynamic, and robust social protection systems capable of ensuring the continuous protection of the citizenry from all forms of shocks and harnessing the principles on which social protection systems are built: solidarity, universality, sustainability, adequacy, and participation. Mr. Chairman, before I conclude, permit me to share with members some efforts and successes of Ghana that we have chalked in the poverty reduction agenda currently. Currently, 1.4 million, representing 332,200 households, out of which 2.4 million extreme poor Ghanaians are beneficiaries of Ghana's flagship cash transfer, that's the Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty, that's the LEAP program. The Ghana School Feeding Program currently provides one hot nutritional meal for about 2,939,000 pupils of public primary and kindergarten schools every school-going day using locally grown foodstuff, and has created market and employment for about 9,480 caterers in their respective districts and communities. The National Health Insurance Scheme also now has active membership of over 11.7 million Ghanaians, which includes 540,305 indigents, the aged, the persons with disability, prison inmates, and LEAP beneficiaries as of August 2019. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, affordable housing and social protection for all in terms of addressing homelessness requires effective targeting system to ensure that resources are fairly distributed and no one is left behind, especially the have-nots. Most often, no one hears the voices of the poor and the vulnerable, and it increases their vulnerability and exclusion. The theme for the 56th section resonates well with the government of Ghana's vision of providing access to affordable housing and social protection initiatives to all, especially the have-nots. It is therefore critical to foster collaboration at all levels and realize its dreams. I thank you all for your attention.
Je remercie.
I thank Her Excellency Cynthia Morrison, Minister of Gender, Children and Social Protection from Ghana, for her statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ariela Luna Flores, Minister of Development and Social Inclusion of Peru.
Con todos y todas.
Good morning, Chair. We congratulate you on your election. Fellow ministers of the social sector in Peru, we have put a great deal of thought into the lack of housing, but also the quality of housing with respect to the environment in which people live. We have a high number of families that more than 3,000 meters at 3,000, more than 3,000 meters altitude, which with temperatures that sometimes descend to 20 centigrade, and there's no heating in such homes. We are rolling out a project that we call My Shelter, and the goal of this is to work towards installing technologies in homes that will enable them to increase the temperature in their homes in their actual bedrooms, but also in the kitchen, so that they can actually have better living conditions. Now, this technology is being rolled out in sparsely populated places and homes that are at over 3,000 meters altitude, and these are people living in poverty and extreme poverty. This is increasing the habitability from several perspectives. First, there's the structure, because we are working towards ensuring that the rooms are actually separated because of the issue of domestic violence, and we're also trying to have healthy homes that have technology that will enable them to increase the temperature, but also to ensure that there's not too much smoke to remove this smoke from the kitchens. So we're backing this activity through in several respects. We are promoting the environment and tackling the effects of climate change. And this is based on clean energy through ensuring that we have a conditioned wall to internally heat the rooms. And this is being implemented in 1 or 2 bedrooms in each home, 1 for children and 1 for the elderly. And we have also been able to reduce to 0 intra-home pollution. And we have done this in a low-cost way, for example, by just improving the kitchens. We're also, and the stoves, we're also looking at the living conditions of people. Whenever somebody lives at a temperature of less than 15 and we reduce it to less than 5, we can improve their living conditions. So we try to raise it to 10 to 15 degrees. So we're also working on empowering women as well, and these homes are done through community participation. Women are the ones who are providing advice and actually rallying the groups to ensure that we can actually roll out these warm homes. These homes are part of our social protection system, which also involves other social programs such as cash transfers and transfers of other types and other productive endeavors. And all these technologies are certified, both materials and inputs that are in consonance with the cultural context. And the raw material comes from the region. And through this, we are generating skilled and unskilled work. Just to give you an example, with the last few, we have been able to create 7,000 jobs in these areas, and this has also helped to reduce poverty. And these homes are also built through a community system which is accountability-based, and this is favorable when it comes to building transparency into these projects. Now, the project is being rolled out as part of a comprehensive policy. And the idea is to contribute towards a social protection system that enables that we have a basic level of economic and social welfare of the population in line with their... And we're also making sure that we address early childhood, school-age children, and people with disabilities and older persons. And one of the targets is to make sure that we have 102,000 such homes built by 2021. Many of the beneficiaries of this project also means that we have to develop capacities so that they can fully leverage their environment. We also have a social protection system targeting families, and these services lead to more public value. And My Shelter, this program that I'm telling you about, has as a priority the sustainability of this approach through the participation of territorial representatives. This goes hand in hand with training and capacity building. And by that I mean that what we want to do is to ensure that we build homes that are affordable and sustainable, that actually improve the quality of life for people who are already there. Because although they have their own homes, these are not homes that are healthy and what they actually need. And in addition to all of these approaches, certification, climate change, and a social protection approach, we're also, through all of this, reducing poverty and extreme poverty in our country. Thank you.
Je remercie Son Excellence.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Ariela Luna Flores, Minister of Development and Social Inclusion of Peru, for her statement. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have a long list of speakers. I kindly ask you once again to respect the time limit for each speaker. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Aino Kaisa Pekkonen, Minister of Social Affairs and Health of Finland.
Honourable Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Finland fully aligns itself with the statement made by the Minister of Croatia on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The goal of the government of Finland is to build a socially, economically and ecologically sustainable society. We are committed to halve homelessness during this government term and eradicate homelessness within 2 government terms by 2027. The Finnish government is also at work to ensure that Finland is carbon neutral by 2035. We will, for example, implement a set of measures to decrease the carbon footprint of housing, improve the energy efficiency of the existing building stock, and support the transition to emission-free heat generation. We aim to make sure that all measures to fight climate change are fair from the social and regional perspective. We want to secure board approval from the public. We trust that the Nordic welfare model, combined with responsible use of neutral resources, is a model that will guarantee the future success of our country. Ladies and gentlemen, governments are responsible to secure affordable housing for all. Markets alone, especially without regulation, will not be able to do it. Addressing the housing needs of the poorest and most vulnerable must be priority. Promoting sound housing policies is also essential for fighting climate change, increasing resilience, mobility, and decreasing very consumption. The roads for implementing this commitment can look different. Each government must determine how to provide better outcomes as they do now. The fact is that homelessness cannot be solved without comprehensive social policy. On global level, the access to social protection is seen as the basic right. The Partnership for Universal Social Protection by 2030 is one example of that. Many UN specialized agencies, many member states, including Finland, and non-governmental organizations are committed to this partnership. UN Secretary General has launched the Decade of Action. To respond his call to act for fair globalization, sustainable growth, and conflict prevention, we need to include the right to social protection for all and development of inclusive social protection system to the mandate and agenda of the Commission for Social Development. Last fall, Finland had its turn to act as President of the Council of the European Union. To promote stronger social and ecological dimension into policy making, we introduced a concept called economy of well-being. It underlines the mutually reinforcing nature of well-being and economic development. Investing in better health, education, employment, gender equality, and social protection for all contributes to sustainable economic growth. Since 2008, the National Housing Strategy has been based on the Housing First principle. It has proven to be effective. Traditionally, housing has been seen as the final goal of the social recovery process. Housing first shifts the paradigm. The idea is simple: to give people permanent housing and the support they need as soon as they become homeless. When a person is secure to have a roof over their head, it is easier to focus on solving other problems. Finland is the only country in the EU where the number of homeless people has declined in recent years. Civil society organizations and community-based efforts play a strong role in housing as in other social development issues. Some of these organizations are part of my delegation here today. I give the floor now to UN Youth Delegate from Finland. Thank you for your attention.
Honorable Chair, Your Excellencies, I'm honored to address this committee today as the UN Youth Delegate of Finland. We're proud for the success of the Housing First policy in Finland. However, the homelessness of young people is on the rise. Youth homelessness can be easily left unnoticed. Young people might be, for example, forced to stay at a friend or a relative. Homelessness is often a consequence of other social problems: poverty, indebtedness, illness, mental health problems, substance abuse, and often a combination of these. Many of these issues can also be inherited from the family. For young people, homelessness is the most radical form of social marginalization, which I argue is one of the most serious problems facing the young people globally today. Defining homelessness in this broader sense as the tip of the iceberg of other social problems helps to recognize solutions for it. In addition to low-threshold housing policies, many issues leading to homelessness can be prevented through comprehensive health and social services and youth inclusion policies. Finally, I would like to stress the needs of vulnerable groups. For example, young people with a migrant background. Also, many homeless young refugees are not visible in the statistics at all. A right for housing and a decent standard of living concerns everyone and is a critical issue to be solved. It is vital to make sure that not a single young person is left out of society. Thank you for your attention.
Je remercie Son Excellence.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Aino-Kaisa Pekkonen, Minister of Social Affairs and Health, for her statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Yulia Sokolovska, Minister of Social Policy of Ukraine.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the delegation of Ukraine aligns itself with a statement delivered by the delegation of the European Union and would like to make a statement in its national capacity. As a Minister of Social Policy of Ukraine, I have the honor, on behalf of the government of Ukraine, to present you the achievements of the national policy on affordable housing and social protection system for all to address homelessness. In September 2018, the President of Ukraine signed the Decree on Sustainable Development Goals of Ukraine until 2030, thereby reaffirming the political will to shape the future based on the sustainable development principles and to fulfill the global commitments set in the UN strategic documents. Today, the national social policy is aimed at minimizing and overcoming the difficult life circumstances of persons, including those caused by a lack of housing. According to the latest data, in Ukraine, about 76,000 people live in damaged accommodations and dormitories, and these people might find themselves at the street at any time. Besides, in terms of housing loss, orphan children, children deprived parental care, persons with mental disabilities, the elderly belong to vulnerable groups. Therefore, one of the priority areas of the ministry activity is the formation a qualitative and effective system of social support for vulnerable groups of the population. Thus, for the last 3 years, apartments have been purchased at the expense of the state funds, and compensation has been paid for the purchase of apartments for the orphan children and children deprived of parental care and persons from among them. Only in 2018, around 2,000 children got their own apartments. Funds for housing for orphan children, children deprived of parental care, and persons from there among them are provided in state budget for the current year as well. A challenge for Ukraine is to provide housing for internally displaced persons who had to move because of the armed aggression of Russian Federation and participants of anti-terrorist operation, Joint Forces Operation in Donbass. During 2017-2018, the Ministry of Social Policy of Ukraine implemented several budget programs providing housing for participants of military operations in other states, persons with disabilities as a result of the anti-terroristic operation among the members of the anti-terroristic operation and their families, internally displaced persons from among the participants of anti-terrorist operations. Since 2018, a new mechanism has been introduced. This mechanism provides for the payment of cash compensation for the purchase of housing to these categories of population. During 2015-2019, 2.6 billion Ukrainian hryvnias was spent for purchasing housing, which allowed to provide housing for nearly 2.8 thousand families. A separate focus area is to work with people who have already lost their homes. For these persons, step-by-step model for the social reintegration of homeless persons has been formed in Ukraine. This model provides for street work and the identification and registration of homeless persons, providing them with night shelter, carrying out a set of measures aimed at their integration into society and their further living with support. In Ukraine, there are 105 institutions for homeless persons, which provide services for more than 25,000 people. Mobile teams work on streets and provide services, consulting, information, distribution, prevention, monitoring of risky behavior in places close to the most vulnerable groups. It should be noted that street social work involves not only stopping people living on the street, but also reducing of the associated risk, prevention of socially dangerous diseases, offenses, uncovering chronic homelessness, etc. Street work is essentially acute in winter and helps to prevent supercooling and deaths of people. In the step-by-step model of social reintegration on homeless persons, the final stage is to obtain housing, private or social. In this regard, certain norms were provided into relevant legislation which defines legal and social principles of state policy for providing social housing for socially vulnerable categories of the population. Currently, homeless people have the right to register their place of residence at the address of institutions for homeless people. In 2018, more than 9.5 thousand people registered their place of residence at the address of such institutions. We also reviewing certain criteria that give the right for social housing to make it affordable. In order to identify persons who are in difficult life circumstances, including those caused by lack of housing and situations that may lead to the loss of housing, positions of social work specialists are being introduced in territorial communities. To the date, there are 3.9 thousand such specialists working in communities. Starting from January 1st, 2020, new law on social services came into force that provides a list of basic services needed to be implemented in Ukraine. Based on this, we also established a new program on social services development that will start its pilot mode in 1 month. Ukraine continues to study and implements international experience in the field of introduction of social support mechanisms for vulnerable groups, improvement of living conditions, etc. Thank you for your attention.
Je remercie Son Excellence Madame Yulia.
I thank the Minister for Social Policy for Ukraine for her statement. And I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Ildemaro Villarroel, Minister of the People's Republic of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela for Housing and Habitat. Mr. Chairman, it's an honor for the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela to participate in this session of the Commission for Social Development with the important issue of addressing the important issue of affordable housing. And we congratulate and thank Ambassador Buffron of Cote d'Ivoire, and we wish you every success. Venezuela also aligned itself with the statement made by Guyana on behalf of G77 and China. Mr. Chairman, when the SDGs were adopted in 2015, the first one was to end poverty, which was no mean undertaking. The decade ahead of us calls for us to take effective action to achieve these noble aspirations of the United Nations, even in the midst of a global context of uncertainty, threats, and conflicts, interventionism, and an increasingly fragile environment. The 75th anniversary of the United Nations and the 25th anniversary of the World Summit for Social Development in Copenhagen should signify a milestone in the international community's awareness of the need to promote real changes with commitments and political actions based on cooperation, and that will underpin the main hopes of our peoples. Poverty and inequality are the main causes for conflict across the world. At a time when the planet seems riddled with so many challenges that are pushing human existence to its limits, the promotion of new sustainable economic and social models based on real harmony between human beings and nature, and based on placing human beings at the center of all political, economic, and social processes, and taking rational, optimal, and sustainable advantage of our natural resources, and to reduce social inequality. All of these are priorities for our country. At the same time, we wish to highlight the successful addressing of challenges in the area of health, as we see within coronavirus, and we join others in commending China on its attempts to effectively and transparently address this issue. Chair, Venezuela was recognized by the United Nations for its swift achievement of the MDGs, and we were a pioneer in adopting the SDGs as part of our public policy by promoting substantive equality between genders, persons, cultures, and communities. And we also promoted a new scheme of values geared towards preserving nature, and we transformed our patterns of capitalist production to adopt new forms of collective production, and we came up with new inclusive socio-productive schemes based on cooperation, solidarity, and complementarity. And in so doing, Venezuela was able to substantially reduce poverty from 29% to 17%. We eradicated illiteracy 100%. And in 2005, this was recognized by UNESCO. We also rolled out important policies to improve our food security schemes, and we distributed 2.5 million metric tons of food to more than 7 million families monthly as an extraordinary strategy to protect our people from the effects of UCMs, unilateral and coercive measures adopted by other countries. We have also increased access to culture so as to promote the cultural upliftment of our people through the National Child and Youth Orchestra system in Venezuela. We're able to integrate more than 1 million children and youths in this program, and we also have broadened access to education. We're at 33%, and by that I mean 10.4 million people are now studying across Venezuela. For Venezuela, social welfare comes through recognizing the right to housing more as a human right rather than a tradable good. We're building an inclusive habitat with resilient infrastructure will only make sense as a way of contributing to the full development of the social being, a being that is based on the recognition of a positive interaction with that being's environment. So we must provide conducive conditions. And for this reason, our cities and towns that we're building in Venezuela are part of a revolutionary and innovative public policy called the Great Housing Mission in Venezuela. And we're seeking to come up with patterns of production and interrelation at the social base with their environment, because we understand housing is the primary unit of protecting our Venezuelan families, and we wish to accomplish and fulfill SDG 11, sustainable citizen communities. And so far, we have delivered more than 3 million housing units in 9 years. As a demonstration of a democratic approach and the preeminence of the values of equality and political freedom in Venezuela, I wish to state that we have held 25 elections over the past 21 years, which were recognized by international organizations and enabled us to renew peace, justice, and to have sound institutions that were able to resist the most adverse conditions. All of these policies are promoted by the central government in Venezuela, despite the financial, economic, and commercial terrorism waged by the government of the United States, and through their illegal and immoral imposition of unilateral coercive measures that violate international law and the human rights of all our people. They used access to food and medicines as weapons of war, and they prevented access to essential services that are needed to safeguard human life. More than $30 billion were stolen from banks in Europe and the United States, in addition to assets held by our oil company in the United States. These illegal policies that violate international law is an innovative form of asymmetric war and is a deliberate attack on the fulfillment of the SDGs in a bid to impose national interests on a single country to the detriment of peace and the welfare of entire populations, and it undermines independence, sovereignty, and the right to self-determination. In closing, we reaffirm that however much there may be attempts to subject our people and frustrate their attempts at independence, our love for freedom and our determination to change our model is such that we will continue to renew our unwavering commitment to protecting the foundational principles of the United Nations system and to ensure that we do indeed fulfill the SDGs. Thank you very much, sir.
Je remercie
I thank His Excellency Mr. Ildemaro Villarroel Arismendi, Minister for Housing and Habitat of Venezuela, for his statement. I'll now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Bouchy Edmond. He is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Haiti.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, 2020 is crucial and a particularly intense year for all of us. We have serious challenges to face and a number of important events to commemorate. These include the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, the 75th anniversary of this Commission, and the 25th anniversary of the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development. Chairman, the Commission has taken as its title for its 58th session and for a priority theme, assuring access for all to systems of social protection and affordable housing to fight homelessness. This theme reminds us that we should take ambitious decisions to build inclusive societies founded on the principles of equality and equity for the welfare of our peoples. These decisions should guarantee access to a safe environment for all. In this regard, the Haitian government welcomes the Secretary General's report, which contributes to enriching the debates during this session. Chairman, Haiti should respond, or has to respond, to these issues with very limited means, and must respond, given the legitimate expectations of its people, to a number of challenges to social development. Over the past decade, the country has been subject to all manner of natural disasters, from the earthquake of the 12th of January 2010 to Hurricane Matthew. These disasters have exacerbated the political, economic and social situation. Nobody can ignore the impact of successive natural disasters on insecurity, terrible corruption, and the increase of unemployment in the country. The President of Haiti, His Excellency Mr. Jovenel Moïse, has taken ownership of the attempt to unblock this social impasse. He's intensified the fight against corruption that he has identified as one of the main problems in the country, and which is to be considered as a crime against economic and social development. He is courageously continuing his fight against this phenomenon. Let us then place Haiti's situation in context. The political instability that has prevailed in the country for some time has deep-rooted causes. It is a major impediment to national reconstruction. Our head of state is aware of this situation and therefore promotes inclusive national dialogue to address the country's main problems in their complexity. He is committed to continuing dialogue. For him, this is the necessary component in the reconciliation and unity of the Haitian people. Chairman, high unemployment rates and social insecurity characterize the country at the moment, and these increase economic precarity and also accentuate extreme poverty. The responses to these issues can be neither sporadic nor based on the immediate situation. The Haitian government is therefore looking for long-term and structural solutions through a plan of action based on institutional reforms and on initiatives that favour the prerequisites for development. These include basic infrastructure, such as electricity, roads, sanitation, drinking water, education, quality healthcare, the eradication of food insecurity, and also building the country's resilience in the face of the harmful effects of climate change. The Haitian authorities recognise that only a consistent social policy based on social justice, on respect of the rights of each individual, on gender equality, and on prioritising youth issues, given that young people are almost 70% of the population, only all of these can help the country to effectively combat existing inequality and to progressively overcome poverty. The authorities remain committed to redoubling their efforts to improve the quality of life for the population, in particular the most vulnerable people, and also to implementing the 2030 Development Agenda. This determination is expressed very clearly in our desire to reinforce our national institutions over the long term. We must also recognise that in Haiti's current context, strengthened international support that is well adapted and aligned to our national priorities is also a necessity. In conclusion, Chairman, on behalf of the Government of the Republic of Haiti, I wish you and the distinguished members of the Bureau every success in the stewardship of our work. All the best. Thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Bushy Tedmon, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Haiti, for his statement. And I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. André Dakunas, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Belarus.
Уважаемый господин
Chairman, Belarus shares the Secretary General's thesis that homelessness is not an individual failure but is a problem of society. The problem is much deeper than just the lack of a home. It's a loss of links to other people, it's alienation from society, inequality, poverty, a lack of a dignified job, and also proper family circumstances. All of this, in our view, represents the root causes of unemployment. People who are in a vulnerable situation as homeless people are much more likely to be victims of violence in public places, of human trafficking, and also of other crimes. In our view, we should pay particular attention to the homelessness of families. Family is a key instrument for developing human capital and therefore requires broader protection. There are also new trends to the destruction of family and rapid urbanization and emigration. These also require our attention. Homelessness requires a comprehensive approach which takes into account a whole range of different measures in different areas, including social policy, employment, and accommodation. Belarus does not have a big homeless problem. We don't have homeless children. The country is taking on efforts to protect citizens, including through carrying out the constitutional right to accommodation. Today, Belarus has 92% of the population have accommodation. Guaranteeing accommodation for the population is one of our highest priorities, and we have one of the highest rates of this in CIS. We are grateful to Belarusian organizations for providing hope for citizens who, for one reason or another, find themselves without a roof over their heads, including when it comes to shelters for homeless people. Accessible housing has always been a very important priority of our state and is seen as one of the basic elements of preventing homelessness. The problems of families, vulnerable members of the population, and also young people are also under the direct supervision of the head of state. Building family housing is also an important socio-economic objective in Belarus. In 2018, the President set an ambitious goal of guaranteeing housing to all families that need it. They also have programs of cheap credit as well. Guaranteeing accessibility also requires close monitoring by the state of prices for construction and also financial support, including cheap credit. Belarus is also developing rented housing as an additional alternative to the kind of credit that we were talking about. The country also attaches importance not only to accessibility of housing, but also that it be comfortable, that it be safe, and that it be modern. We are increasing the amount of energy-efficient housing, and there's also a plan for smart cities with mass use of IT technology in construction, including a system of intellectual management or smart housing. Green construction also helps us to build comfortable housing and is important in providing for climate security. We believe that the idea of the smart town and the green town are the most promising in housing policy, and carrying them out successfully will be useful also in dealing with homelessness. We are ready to work actively on these questions with all interested parties. Chairman, homelessness is discussed by the Committee of Social Development for the first time. We think that the outcome of our joint work should be an innovative resolution which provides an important and specific element in achieving the SDGs connected with homelessness and will also help us to fulfill the agenda for sustainable development on the whole. Thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency Andrei Dapkunas, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Belarus for his statement. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the time allotted for us this morning. So we just heard the last speaker for this morning. May I thank the Secretariat as well as the interpreters.
Oui, je vais aborder l'organisation.
Yes, I wanted to talk about the organization of our work. Based on our organization of work, the general debate on sub-items A and B of item 3 will continue tomorrow on the 11th of February at 3 p.m. This afternoon, at 3 p.m., the Commission will organize a high-level panel on the priority theme, affordable housing, ensuring affordable housing and social protection systems for all to address homelessness. This meeting stands adjourned.